I found the first hidden camera 3 days after we moved in. It was nestled in the bathroom vent, a tiny black eye nearly invisible unless you were standing directly beneath it, looking up at just the right angle. Which I was, while changing a flickering bulb. My wife, Hannah, said I was being paranoid when I showed her. "It's probably just a screw hole or something," she insisted, squinting upward. But I knew better. 15 years in IT security teaches you the difference between random holes and surveillance equipment. I didn't tell her about the others I found that week. Behind the bedroom mirror, inside the smoke detector in the hallway, nestled among the artificial plants in the living room. 5 cameras total, each one wireless, each one perfectly positioned to capture our most private moments. The previous owners, the Caldwells, had seemed so normal when we bought the house. Martin was an accountant. His wife, Diane, taught 2nd grade. They were moving to Florida for retirement after 30 years in the spacious Victorian, their forever home, they'd called it, until advancing age made the stairs too difficult. They'd given us a detailed tour, pointing out the recent renovations, the quirky old radiators, the spot in the garden where lilacs bloomed spectacularly each spring. They never mentioned the cameras. I removed each one carefully, wearing gloves, placing them in a static-proof bag. I didn't tell Hannah. Why frighten her? The Caldwells were gone, and whatever creepy surveillance hobby they'd had was over. We'd changed the locks, updated the security system. I convinced myself it was finished. Then I found the door. It was hidden behind the bookshelf in the study, a classic secret passage, like something from a movie. I only discovered it because I was running Ethernet cable and noticed the wall measurements didn't add up. There was about 3 feet of space unaccounted for between the study and the adjacent guest bedroom. The bookshelf swung outward when I pushed on the right side, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. Inside was a steep set of stairs leading down to a space that shouldn't exist, a room beneath our house that hadn't appeared on any inspection reports or floor plans. A monitoring station. The small room contained a desk with 3 monitors, a high-end computer tower, external hard drives, and a sophisticated switching system that would allow someone to toggle between camera feeds. Everything was powered down but looked relatively new. On the wall hung a map of our house with X marks indicating camera locations, including 12 I hadn't yet found. My first instinct was to call the police. But what crime could I report? The Caldwells owned the house when they installed this. They'd sold the property legally, and nothing in our contract specified they had to disclose weird hidden rooms. Was secretly recording previous occupants illegal? Probably. But they weren't recording us anymore. I should have told Hannah then. Should have called the authorities. Instead, I made the decision that would unravel everything. I powered up the system. Most of the hard drives contained footage dating back nearly 7 years. Different families. Different tenants. I recognized one couple from photos the real estate agent had shown us, renters who had lived here before the Caldwells moved back in last year. On the screen, these strangers moved through the same spaces we now called home, unaware they were being watched during their most intimate moments. But the Caldwells hadn't owned the house 7 years ago. According to our paperwork, they'd purchased it, lived in it for 28 years, rented it out briefly while trying retirement in Arizona, then returned when that didn't work out. Finally, they'd sold it to us when Florida became their new retirement dream. Something wasn't adding up. I kept digging. The archived footage revealed a pattern. A family would move in, live normally for months, then something would change. Arguments would start. Paranoia would set in. They'd begin to look exhausted, jumping at shadows. Eventually, they'd move out, usually in a hurry. The timestamp showed 5 different families over 7 years. Had they found the cameras too? Deeper in the archives was a folder labeled Guests. Inside were short clips focused on specific visitors, repairmen, friends, dinner guests, as if someone had been collecting information on everyone who entered the house. And then I found the recordings of the Caldwells themselves. Not as residents, but as visitors, entering the monitoring room through the hidden passage. The footage came from a camera I hadn't spotted, built into the monitoring station itself. The time-stamp showed regular visits, always when the house was empty of tenants, sometimes in the middle of the night. In the videos, they would sit silently, watching the monitors. Sometimes they'd exchange whispers I couldn't quite hear. Their expressions were difficult to read, not quite pleasure, not quite disgust, more like clinical interest. Occasionally, they would take notes. Most disturbing was the footage from between tenants. The Caldwells would move through empty rooms with spray bottles and cloths, meticulously cleaning specific areas. Martin would test each camera, adjusting angles. Diane would rearrange furniture slightly, open or close certain curtains. They weren't just watching. They were creating an environment, conducting some kind of experiment. I shut everything down, feeling physically ill. We'd been living in a laboratory. How many of our predecessors had fled because they'd sensed something wrong, even if they couldn't identify what it was? That night, I lay beside Hannah in bed, watching her sleep. Should I tell her? We'd emptied our savings account for the down payment. Her mother had loaned us money for closing costs. We couldn't afford to move again. I decided to remove the remaining cameras first, then figure out how to break the news. The next day, while Hannah was at work, I systematically searched every spot marked on the hidden rooms map. By evening, I had collected all 17 cameras. I locked them away in my toolbox and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. When Hannah came home, I almost told her everything. Then I noticed how happy she looked, happier than I'd seen her in years. "I love this house," she said, hugging me. "I feel like we were meant to be here." I hesitated, then hugged her back. Maybe it was over. Maybe we could just move forward. That night, I dreamed of secret passages and watching eyes. I woke at 3 a.m. uneasy. Hannah wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, making tea, bleary-eyed. "Can't sleep either?" I asked. She smiled weakly. "I keep hearing noises. Probably just the house settling." Over the next few days, we both experienced it, unexplained sounds when the house should have been silent. Footsteps overhead when we were both downstairs. The sensation of doors opening and closing elsewhere in the house. Several times, Hannah mentioned feeling watched. I told myself it was psychological. We were adjusting to a new house with unfamiliar sounds. But deep down, I knew better. A week after discovering the hidden room, I came home early from work. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street, an older model sedan with Florida plates. My chest tightened. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I called out for Hannah, but got no answer. Her car was in the garage, her purse on the kitchen counter. She should have been home. I checked the backyard, then each room. Nothing. Finally, with rising panic, I approached the study and the hidden entrance to the monitoring room. The bookshelf was slightly ajar. I walked down those narrow stairs, heart pounding, uncertain what I'd find. The room was empty, but the equipment was on, all cameras functioning again, though I'd removed every one I could find. 17 feeds showed different angles of our house on the monitors, plus an 18th I hadn't known about, showing the inside of this very room. My image stared back at me from one of the screens, expression frozen in horror. A document was open on another monitor, some kind of report with charts, data tables, and photographs of previous tenants, including several shots of Hannah and me entering the house on moving day. At the top, Subject Property Number 8 Longitudinal Behavioral Study. And at the bottom, a name and institutional affiliation that made my blood run cold. Dr. Martin Caldwell, Department of Psychological Research, Overton Institute. The Caldwells weren't retired accountant and teacher. They were researchers. I heard a sound behind me, footsteps on the narrow stairs. I turned as Martin Caldwell himself appeared in the doorway. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "Where's my wife?" I demanded. "Diane is showing her the other access points," he said calmly, as if this were a normal conversation. "Your Hannah is quite interested in our work now that she understands it." "What are you talking about? What work?" Martin smiled the same benign smile he'd had when selling us the house. "How environments affect behavior, of course. How subtle acoustic and visual stimuli can create psychological responses. This house is specially designed, the angles, the lighting, the hidden sound system that can create almost imperceptible noises. We've been documenting the effects for decades. You've been experimenting on people? On us? My voice rose. That's illegal. Immoral. We always select suitable candidates. People with particular psychological profiles. Your background checks, credit history, medical records, they told us you and Hannah would be ideal subjects. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. Some participants graduate to becoming research associates. Hannah shows particular promise. From upstairs came the sound of the front door opening, then Hannah's laugh. A sound I recognized but with an unfamiliar edge to it, followed by another woman's voice. Hannah knows about this? For how long? She found one of our backup cameras 3 days ago. She was much more scientifically curious than you were. Martin glanced at the monitors. Ah, here they come. On the screen, I could see Hannah and Diane entering the kitchen, talking animatedly. Hannah looked energized, gesturing with her hands the way she did when excited about a new project. They disappeared from that camera's view, then appeared on another, heading toward the study. You should know, Martin continued, the previous tenants who reacted negatively had to be relocated. For data integrity. You can't just make people disappear. I said, but the certainty in his eyes told me they already had. Hannah's voice called from upstairs. Honey? Are you home? Martin stepped aside, gesturing toward the stairs. Shall we join them? Diane is eager to explain how you can contribute to our research. Your technical background could be quite valuable. I looked from his pleasant smile to the monitors showing my house, our house, with its invisible web of surveillance and manipulation. In one screen, Hannah stood in the study, scanning the room with new awareness, a small smile playing on her lips. I didn't recognize her expression. I heard myself ask, how many houses do you have? How many families? Martin's smile widened. Who said anything about us owning the houses? My mind raced to our neighbors, the couple next door who had mentioned feeling uneasy in their home. The family across the street who always seemed on edge. The entire neighborhood with its similar architectural styles, all houses built or renovated within the past decade. Your reaction right now, Martin observed, taking out a small notebook, is precisely why proper subject selection is so crucial. Footsteps approached the hidden door above. I had seconds to decide, confront whatever Hannah had become or flee. Hannah's voice again, closer now. Is he down there with you? Did you tell him about the expansion? Not yet, dear. Martin called up, eyes never leaving mine. We're just getting to that part. I looked at the surveillance feeds one last time, at my house, my neighborhood, my wife, all suddenly unfamiliar. All part of something I couldn't fully comprehend. The choice I made next would determine everything. I can't tell you what that choice was. But I can tell you this. If you've recently moved into a house that feels strangely perfect for you, if you sometimes feel watched when you're alone, if you hear subtle sounds you can't quite identify, check behind your vents. Look for unexplained spaces between walls. And remember, the most effective experiments are the ones where the subjects never realize they're being studied. The Clearfield Public Library reopened last spring after a 9-month renovation, but I'm the only librarian who remained from the original staff. Everyone else quit during construction. They claimed it was the reduced hours, the temporary relocation, the uncertainty. But I knew better. I saw what happened before they announced the renovation. It started with the books. Specifically, with what we found inside them. I've been at Clearfield Library for 12 years. Patrons leave things in books all the time, bookmarks, receipts, the occasional pressed flower. But in March of last year, we began finding pages. Single sheets of paper, torn from notebooks, each filled with the same meticulous handwriting. Each describing, in vivid detail, a library patron. The first appeared in a returned copy of The Road. Evelyn found it during check-in. Asterisk female, early 40s. Dark hair with auburn highlights, newly done. Wears wedding ring but touches back of neck when speaking to male reference librarian. Always arrives Thursdays at 3:15, leaves precisely at 4:40. Checks out self-help and true crime. Keeps romance novels hidden in canvas bag. Has faint bruising at wrists. Parked in North Lot, blue Honda Civic, license KLR 471J. Home address confirmed as 1422 Sycamore Lane, *. Evelyn dismissed it as someone's creative writing exercise and tossed it in recycling. 2 days later, I found another note, this time in a returned copy of Gone Girl. Similar handwriting. * male, late 60s. Retired military, visible anchor tattoo, military posture. Arrives daily at opening. Reads newspapers for exactly 87 minutes. Takes notes in small black notebook. Careful not to make eye contact. Parks white Ford truck 3 blocks away though handicap spaces available. Follows reference librarian Monica to her car on Tuesdays. *. By the third note, we reported it to our director, Margaret. She promised to review security footage, but the cameras had been malfunctioning for weeks due to budget cuts. The notes continued appearing. 1 or 2 per week, always in returned books, always describing regular patrons in uncomfortable detail. Home addresses, children's names, daily habits, information no casual observer should know. The most disturbing part: the descriptions were accurate. We recognized our regulars in these clinical profiles. Margaret contacted the police after the 8th note, which described her own teenage daughter's route home from school. Officers took statements, collected the notes as evidence, and promised to increase patrols. The next day, every single security camera in the building began working perfectly. No one had repaired them. The notes stopped abruptly. For 2 weeks, we found nothing in the return books. We thought perhaps the police presence had scared off whoever was responsible. That's when we found the first journal. It wasn't hidden in a book but placed prominently on the returns desk before opening, a slim black notebook with no markings. Inside, page after page of the same handwriting, detailing not just patrons, but us. The library staff. * Evelyn Morris, head of circulation, lives alone with 2 cats. Allergic to shellfish. Sister in Cincinnati she hasn't spoken to in 3 years. Takes Lexapro daily. Shower curtain has nautical pattern. Leaves door unlocked when bringing in groceries. Bedroom window faces woods behind apartment complex. *. The entry for each staff member filled multiple pages. Sleep habits. Medical information. Names of family members. Banking details. Security system layouts. Our most private moments documented as if the observer had been living in our homes. Margaret called the police again. They took the journal, dusted for prints, found nothing. They suggested we close the library temporarily. That afternoon, Margaret announced the renovation. The library would close for extensive modernization. We would all be placed on administrative leave with partial pay. That night, Margaret's house burned down. Electrical fire, the investigators said. No foul play suspected. She survived but decided to take early retirement and moved to Arizona. The day after the fire, a new notebook appeared on my car's passenger seat. My car had been locked. The notebook contained only 1 page of writing. * The library sees all. The library knows all. The library keeps all secrets. The library must remain open. * One by one, my colleagues resigned. By the time construction began, I was the only one left from the original staff. I stayed because I needed the job. Because I have a mortgage and student loans. Because I told myself it was just a disturbed person playing elaborate pranks. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I tried to leave. The renovation took longer than expected. They gutted the entire building, preserving only the historic facade. The interior was completely reimagined, open concept, glass walls, modern technology. No shadowy corners. No hidden spaces. Nowhere to hide. Or so we thought. When we reopened, I had 7 new colleagues, None with library experience, but all oddly qualified in other ways. Elijah, our new director, came from a cybersecurity background. Diana, children's librarian, had been a child psychologist. Marcus, reference specialist, previously worked for a data mining company. They were competent, friendly, but something felt off. They never discussed their previous jobs in detail. They all moved to Clearfield specifically for these positions. None had family in the area. The renovated library was beautiful but strange. Certain architectural choices made no sense. A staircase that led to a maintenance door too small to be functional. Windows positioned to create permanent blind spots despite the open floor plan. Walls that seemed thicker than necessary. Most peculiar were the new catalog computers. They couldn't be shut down, even overnight. Elijah explained they ran special indexing software that needed to operate continuously. 3 weeks after reopening, I noticed something disturbing. Our patron records were changing. Not dramatically, just small adjustments to personal information. A phone number altered by 1 digit. A street address changed from lane to road. Birth years shifted backward or forward. When I mentioned it to Elijah, he smiled his perfect, empty smile. Data migration issues, he said. We're aware and working on it. That same day, I overheard Diana on the phone in the break room. Subject profiles updating correctly. Behavioral predictions at 93% accuracy. She saw me and immediately switched to discussing children's story time. I began paying closer attention. Marcus spent hours reviewing security footage, tracking specific patrons, timing their movements, noting which books they browsed but didn't check out. The new self-checkout machines took twice as long as necessary, scanning patrons' faces while they waited. I discovered Diana's storytime selections weren't random. Each week's themes corresponded to recent topics searched on our catalog computers. She was reading books that matched the private research interests of parents. Most concerning was the new basement level, allegedly for archival storage. Staff access required biometric scans and a special keycard. Only Elijah and 2 maintenance workers I never saw during daylight hours could enter. I tried mentioning my concerns to our new assistant director, Rachel. The next day, she didn't come to work. Elijah announced she'd accepted a position at another library. Her apartment was emptied overnight. Her social media accounts vanished. I considered quitting, but the warning from that notebook haunted me. Instead, I began my own investigation. I stayed late, volunteering for closing shifts. I made copies of strange memos I found on the staff printer, requisitions for equipment no library would need, communications with organizations that didn't exist when I Googled them. I noted the same 12 patrons who came every day but never checked anything out. They sat at different tables, used different computers, but always stayed exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Most importantly, I began tracking the books. Certain volumes were being systematically removed from circulation, not officially, but practically. They would be shelved in increasingly remote locations, or marked as damaged, or simply disappear from the catalog while remaining physically present. Books on privacy, civil liberties, digital security, government surveillance. I compiled my evidence carefully, kept it on an encrypted drive I never connected to library Wi-Fi. I reached out to Evelyn, who now worked at a bookstore in the next town. When we met for coffee, she cut me off before I could explain. "Don't tell me anything," she whispered. "3 former staff members have died in the past year. Accidents. Margaret's second fire last month. Just be careful." She slid a business card across the table for a reporter at the regional newspaper. On the back, she'd written, "Tell stories about libraries." As she stood to leave, she leaned close. "They're not just watching patrons." I contacted the reporter, Jason Chin, who had written several investigative pieces on government surveillance programs. When we met at a diner, he was already waiting with his laptop open. "You're the 3rd librarian from a renovated library to contact me this year," he said without preamble. "The others? One died in a hit-and-run before we could meet. The other disappeared after sending me files. He turned his laptop to show me a map with dozens of points marked across the country. Every marker is a public library that underwent sudden emergency renovations in the past 18 months. All following the same pattern. I told him everything: the notes and books, the journals, the mysterious notebook left in my car. It's more advanced than the others, he muttered, typing rapidly. They're refining the approach. Who is they? He showed me documents, redacted government contracts, shell companies tracing back to defense contractors, patents for behavioral prediction algorithms utilizing literary preference data. They're using libraries as data collection points, he explained. Think about it. Where else can you track what information people voluntarily consume? Libraries are perfect surveillance stations hidden in plain sight. But why Clearfield? We're not exactly a metropolitan hub. That's exactly why. Small to mid-sized communities. Established patterns. Limited variables. Your renovation wasn't about modernization. It was about installation. Of what? Everything from facial recognition to content tracking systems. They're creating comprehensive profiles of every citizen, not just what you read, but how you react to what you read. He stopped abruptly, staring past me toward the parking lot. His face drained of color. Don't turn around, he whispered. White van, 3 men. They followed you. That's impossible. I was careful. Your phone. Your car. Your clothes. They have ways. He slid from the booth. Meet me tomorrow at the location in the file marked contingency. If I'm not there by noon, publish what you have. He walked to the restroom and disappeared through the window. At my apartment, something felt wrong. Items on my desk sat at slightly different angles. My laptop had a small scratch that wasn't there before. They had been here. I copied Jason's files, hiding one set at my neighbor's apartment, then reviewed the contents of the flash drive. The library renovation program, Project Reading Room, existed across dozens of communities. The stated objective: comprehensive cognitive and behavioral profiling through literary consumption analysis. But more disturbing were the intervention protocols for patrons whose reading habits triggered certain flags. These ranged from subtle, strategic book recommendations to guide ideological development, to alarming extraction for enhanced assessment. Under original staff retention candidates, I found my name with a single notation: compliant through leveraged fear. They had never been concerned about me leaving because they knew exactly how to control me. The next day, local news reported Jason's death. Single car accident, vehicle found at the bottom of a ravine. I didn't return to the library or my apartment. I used cash to check into motels, working my way across counties, states. I've sent copies of Jason's files and my own documentation to journalists, watchdog groups, and government oversight committees. I don't know if it will make any difference. I do know that your local library may not be what you think it is. That renovation last year? Those new computers? The staff turnover? The books that seem to have disappeared from the catalog? Pay attention. They're watching what you read. They're listening to what you ask. They're tracking what you learn. And they're coming to a library near you. Just remember, these days, you aren't the only one reading over your shoulder. I didn't plan to follow him home. Not at first. It was late, almost midnight, and Dottie's diner was about to close. I'd been nursing the same lukewarm coffee for 2 hours, watching the last few patrons filter out into the darkness of our small town. Just a Tuesday night ritual I'd developed since moving to Millfield 3 months ago, sitting alone, observing people, imagining their lives. That's when he walked in. Last customer of the night. There was nothing remarkable about him. Mid-40s, average height, forgettable face beneath a baseball cap pulled low. His clothes were clean but worn. The only notable thing was his timing. Who comes to a diner at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday? Carly, the waitress who'd been giving me sympathetic refills all evening, shot him an irritated glance. She'd already cleaned the grill, counted her tips. But she plastered on a smile anyway. Coffee and pie? She asked, Not even bringing a menu? He nodded, eyes fixed on the laminate tabletop, voice barely audible. Peach, if you have it. His hands caught my attention. They were immaculate. Nails perfectly trimmed, cuticles precise, skin smooth. The hands of someone who took extraordinary care of their appearance. But only their hands. The rest of him seemed deliberately unremarkable. Something about the contradiction made me keep watching. He never looked up when Carly brought his order, never acknowledged her with more than a nod. He ate methodically, cutting the pie into identical small bites, wiping his mouth after each one. When he finished, he left cash on the table, exact change plus a $5 tip. As he stood to leave, his jacket shifted, and I glimpsed something tucked into his waistband. Not a gun. A notebook, maybe? Something with a leather cover. Before I could look away, his eyes met mine. Pale blue, startlingly alert. A flicker of recognition? But we'd never met. I glanced down at my phone, heart suddenly racing. When I looked up again, he was gone. I paid my bill and left, telling myself to go home, to stick to my usual routine. Instead, I found myself scanning the empty street. His car was pulling away, an older model sedan, beige or light gray in the dim streetlights. Without conscious decision, I was in my own car, following at a distance. It wasn't hard to stay undetected in a town of 4,000 people at midnight. No traffic, no witnesses. I maintained 3 blocks between us, headlights dimmed, as he drove through the quiet streets, past the darkened storefronts of Main Street, toward the outskirts of town. He turned onto Orchard Road, an area I didn't know well. Large properties, old farmhouses set back from the street. His sedan slowed, then turned into a long driveway. I killed my lights completely, coasting to a stop on the shoulder about 100 yards past. Through my rearview mirror, I watched his headlights illuminate a modest 2-story house. No lights were on inside. No other cars in the driveway. He sat in his car for nearly 5 minutes before getting out and walking to the front door. I should have left then. Gone home. Forgotten the strange man with the perfect hands who ate pie at midnight. But something kept me there, watching his house from the darkness of my car. The downstairs lights flickered on. Then, methodically, lights in each upstairs room, one after another. I imagined him moving through the house in a precise pattern. Then all went dark except for a single window on the second floor. What was I doing here? This wasn't normal behavior. I'd moved to Millfield to escape the chaos of my previous life, not to create new problems. Yet I couldn't make myself start the car and drive away. Just 5 more minutes, I told myself. Then I'll go. But in those 5 minutes, something happened that cemented my decision to stay. The man emerged from his front door, now dressed in dark clothing. He walked to his garage, disappeared inside, and returned carrying what looked like a shovel. He placed it in his trunk, then went back for something else. A large duffel bag that he handled carefully, as if it contained something fragile. Or something already broken. He drove away, this time in the opposite direction, away from town. I waited until his taillights disappeared around a bend, then made a decision I still can't fully explain. I got out of my car. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings as I walked up his driveway. Breaking and entering. Trespassing. Criminal charges. But another voice whispered that something wasn't right about this man. The incongruity of those manicured hands. The silent, methodical way he moved. The tools in his trunk at midnight. His front door was locked, of course. But a side window to what looked like a laundry room had a broken latch, visible in the beam of my phone's flashlight. The kind of minor home repair people put off indefinitely in small, safe towns like Millfield. Inside, the house smelled clean. Too clean. Antiseptic. I moved through the downstairs rooms, my phone's light revealing sparse furnishings. A couch that looked never used. Bookshelves with no books. A dining table with a single chair. The kitchen was immaculate, counters empty except for a dish rack holding 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 set of cutlery. It wasn't just minimalist. It was a facade. A place designed to look lived in without actually being a home. Upstairs, I found a similar setup. A bedroom with a perfectly made bed. A bathroom with a single toothbrush. And then, at the end of the hall, a door with a deadbolt. Locked. I should have left. That deadbolt was a clear boundary, the final warning that I was crossing a line from which I couldn't return. But the image of that shovel going into his trunk kept flashing in my mind. The lock wasn't sophisticated. A simple pin tumbler I managed to pick with a bobby pin from my pocket, a skill from a misspent youth I never thought I'd use again. When the lock clicked open, I hesitated, hand on the doorknob, giving myself one last chance to walk away. I didn't take it. The room beyond was nothing like the rest of the house. Walls covered with maps, photographs, newspaper clippings. A large desk dominated the space, multiple monitors showing what looked like surveillance footage of different locations around town. Dottie's Diner. The town square. The elementary school playground. But it was the wall of photographs that froze me in place. Dozens of them, arranged chronologically, judging by the dates written beneath. People going about their lives, clearly unaware they were being photographed. And next to many photos, little artifacts. A hair ribbon. A cigarette butt. A coffee cup lid. Trophies. I recognized some of the faces. The pharmacist who'd filled my prescription last week. The librarian. Carly from the diner. And there, in the most recent photos, me. Me walking into my apartment building. Me at the grocery store. Me sitting at my usual booth at Dottie's, watching people. Being watched myself. Beneath my photo, a handwritten note. Observer. Potential impediment. My legs nearly gave out. How long had he been watching me? Why? I forced myself to look closer at the other photos, at the notes beneath them. Some had red X marks. Others had dates circled. Future dates. On the desk, a leather-bound journal lay open. The same one I'd glimpsed earlier. I picked it up with trembling hands and began to read. Subject 23 eliminated, disposal site C. Complications minimal. Subject 24 under observation, vulnerability assessment ongoing. New variable introduced to environment, male, 30s, recent arrival. Observational patterns suggest potential awareness. Risk assessment required before proceeding with next phase. I was the new variable. The potential impediment. And Subject 24 was Carly. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text message. Unknown number. Enjoying your visit to my home? Stay right there. We should talk. Ice flooded my veins. He knew I was here. Had the house been under surveillance too? I shoved the journal into my jacket pocket and ran, no longer caring about stealth or evidence. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the side window. In my panic, I cut my hand on the broken latch, leaving blood on the windowsill. DNA evidence of my trespassing. Evidence that might never be found if no one knew to look for it. I made it to my car, started the engine with shaking hands, and peeled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, headlights appeared around the bend, his car returning. Had he forgotten something? Or had he somehow been alerted to my presence? I drove straight to the sheriff's office, certain that whatever I'd stumbled upon was bigger and more terrible than a simple break-in. But as I pulled into the parking lot, doubts crept in. What exactly had I discovered? A man with a clean house and a room full of photos? Creepy, yes. Illegal? I wasn't sure. And I'd broken into his house. I had no legal right to be there, no warrant, no authority. Sheriff Miller was working late, as usual. I'd met him briefly when I first moved to town, a stocky man with a weathered face and tired eyes. He looked up in surprise when I burst in. Whoa there, son! What's got you in such a state? I tried to explain what I'd seen, what I'd done, watching his expression shift from concern to skepticism. So you followed a stranger home, broke into his house, and found photographs? He summarized, making it sound exactly as deranged as it was. And the journal? I insisted, reaching into my pocket. But it wasn't there. Had I dropped it in my panicked flight? Or had I never taken it at all, just imagined doing so because I wanted proof? Look, Sheriff Miller said. Walter Keene has lived in this town for 15 years. Keeps to himself, sure, but never caused any trouble. Works from home doing some kind of data analysis. Walter Keene? The name meant nothing to me. The man you followed home and burglarized, Miller clarified. His address is 1478 Orchard Road, right? I nodded, cold dread spreading through me. How did he know the address I'd never specified? Walter called about 10 minutes ago, Miller continued. Reported a break-in. Said nothing was taken, but he was concerned. Described a car matching yours parked near his property earlier. Sheriff, you need to search his house. The locked room at the end of the upstairs hallway. And tell the judge I need a warrant because a newcomer to town committed a felony and claims he saw something suspicious? Miller shook his head. I've known Walter for years. You've been here, 3 months? Check the missing persons reports, I pressed. The journal mentioned subjects. People being eliminated. There must be records. There aren't any missing persons in Millfield. Miller cut me off. Not a one in the 5 years I've been sheriff. Then check nearby towns. This man is dangerous. Miller studied me for a long moment. Tell you what. I'll drive you home. You've had a shock. In the morning, if you still want to pursue this, we'll talk it through properly. I didn't have a choice. My wild accusations against a long-time resident weren't going to gain traction, not without evidence. I let Miller drive me home in his cruiser, my own car left in the station parking lot. As we pulled up to my apartment building, Miller turned to me. Word of advice? Millfield's a quiet town. People like it that way. Whatever you were running from when you moved here, don't bring trouble with you. How did he know I was running from something? I watched his cruiser disappear down the street, then hurried up to my apartment, double-locking the door behind me. Sleep was out of the question. I paced, trying to piece together what I'd seen, what it might mean. Near dawn, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I sank onto my couch, eyes closing against my will. I woke to knocking. Insistent, authoritative. Morning light streamed through my windows. I'd slept for hours. Sheriff Miller stood at my door, expression grim. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. About last night. Did you search his house? The room. Walter Keene was found dead this morning. Miller interrupted. Single gunshot wound. Self-inflicted, looks like. My mind reeled. That's impossible. He wasn't suicidal, he was. A meticulous man, Miller finished. Left everything in order, including a note expressing regret about his observations of townspeople. Said he couldn't stop himself from watching, documenting. Called it a compulsion. A confession? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Of sorts. Mentioned he'd been seen last night. That his project was compromised. Miller's eyes hardened. The thing is, we found your blood on his windowsill. And his journal is missing. My hand went to my pocket automatically. Still empty. I didn't take it, I insisted. And this isn't right. He wasn't planning suicide. He was planning something else. Something worse. Maybe, Miller acknowledged. But we'll never know now. Case closed before it opened. He headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Walter's photos, his notes, they've all been boxed up. Evidence in a suicide. Not available for public review. The message was clear. Whatever I thought I'd seen was now officially non-existent. After Miller left, I sat motionless, trying to process what had happened. A man I'd followed on impulse was dead. Labeled a harmless voyeur with a tragic end. Any evidence of something more sinister, conveniently contained. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Welcome to the team, Observer. Your assessment is complete. Orientation materials will arrive soon. Subject 24 has been reassigned. I've been in Millfield another month now. I still go to Dottie's diner most nights, still watch people. Carly isn't there anymore. Moved away suddenly, according to the new waitress. No forwarding address. Sometimes I see Sheriff Miller there too. He nods at me, a silent acknowledgement between colleagues. And sometimes, late at night, I notice someone new sitting alone in a booth, watching the other customers with too much interest. I make sure to be the last person to leave. And sometimes I follow them home, just to see what they'll do. The first time I noticed the black sedan following me, I was driving home from a domestic dispute call at the Henderson place. Nothing serious, just Dale drinking too much again, Marion threatening to leave, the usual Friday night performance they'd been putting on for the 6 years I'd been sheriff of Crestfall County. It was nearly midnight, that strange hour when the roads belong only to those with purpose or those with secrets. I'd been a sheriff long enough to know which was which. The headlights appeared about half a mile behind me on Route 16. Nothing unusual there. But when I turned onto Sawmill Road, a local shortcut only residents use, the sedan followed. Crestfall only has 4,200 residents. I know most of them by name. But I didn't recognize this car. I slowed to 25 miles per hour. The sedan slowed too, maintaining the exact same distance. I accelerated suddenly to 55. The sedan matched my speed perfectly. Deliberately testing them now, I hit my brakes. The sedan slowed smoothly, never closing the gap, never falling back. Like it was tethered to my cruiser by an invisible cable, keeping precisely 200 feet between us. 23 years in law enforcement teaches you the difference between coincidence and intent. This was definitely the latter. I turned onto my street, a quiet cul-de-sac where I'd lived alone since Karen left 3 years ago. The sedan stopped at the entrance, headlights burning in my rearview. It idled there as I pulled into my driveway, watching as I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. Only after I closed the door did I hear it drive away. I told myself it was probably nothing. But I locked my service weapon in the bedside table drawer that night instead of the gun safe in the basement. Just in case. The sedan was back the next day. And the next. Never close enough to identify the driver, never threatening enough to justify official action. Just watching. Always appearing when I was alone, keeping that same precise distance, vanishing when other cars were present. By the 5th day, I'd had enough. I decided to review traffic camera footage, see if I could identify the vehicle. But as I scrolled through the digital records, I found something disturbing. There were gaps in the coverage, precise 20-minute intervals where the cameras on my regular routes simply stopped recording. These gaps didn't appear anywhere else in the system. Just the cameras that would have captured my cruiser. And, presumably, the black sedan behind me. "Betty," I called to my dispatcher. "Who else has access to our surveillance system?" "Just you, me, and Deputy Collins," she said. "Why?" "We have some footage anomalies. I want to make sure nobody unauthorized has been tampering with our systems." Betty frowned. "Well, there was that IT contractor the county sent over last month. Upgraded our security protocols, installed that new software. But he had all the proper credentials. I didn't remember any IT contractor. What was his name? Marshall something. You signed the work order." I hadn't signed any work order. But when Betty pulled the form from our files, there was my signature, perfect down to the distinctive loop in the M of Mercer. That night, I took a different route home, down back roads I rarely used. The sedan found me anyway, appearing behind me as I passed the old Wilson farm. This time, I made a split-second decision, slamming on my brakes and throwing my cruiser into reverse, accelerating backward toward the sedan. It retreated with the same mechanical precision, keeping the gap constant even as I pushed my cruiser to 40 miles per hour in reverse. Impossible driving. Inhuman reflexes. I stopped, heart pounding. Through the glare of headlights, I could make out only the silhouette of a driver, a perfect, motionless outline that gave nothing away. The next day, I contacted the State Bureau of Investigation. Agent Larson arrived within hours, a brisk woman with a no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. "Unmarked vehicle following an officer is cause for concern," she agreed, reviewing my notes. "No plate, expert driving capability, consistent pattern of surveillance." She looked up. "Any threats against you recently? Cases that might motivate retaliation?" I shook my head. Crest Falls quiet. Biggest case this year was the Mason Pharmacy break-in. Family troubles? Personal conflicts? Nothing that would explain this. Agent Larson frowned. "Let's set up additional surveillance. If this vehicle approaches tonight, we'll intercept it." The trap was set. 2 unmarked SBI vehicles positioned along my route home. New cameras installed to patch the mysterious gaps in our system. Agent Larson riding shotgun in my cruiser. The black sedan never appeared. For 3 nights, with state agents watching, nothing happened. Agent Larson was professional but skeptical. "We'll maintain a presence for 2 more days," she said. "But Sheriff, sometimes stress can." "I'm not imagining this." I cut her off. The agents left on Friday. That night, alone again in my cruiser, the sedan returned. This time, I was ready. I'd installed my own dashboard camera, one not connected to the department's system. As the headlights appeared in my mirror, I activated it with a tap. "I see you're back," I said aloud. "Let's find out who you are." I drove unpredictably, taking random turns, accelerating and slowing erratically. The sedan followed flawlessly, always adjusting, always watching. I narrated everything for the camera. When I finally arrived home, I didn't go inside. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and walked directly toward the sedan, which had stopped at its usual position. It reversed smoothly, maintaining that same distance even as I approached on foot. "Sheriff's Department," I called. "Stop your vehicle and identify yourself." The sedan continued its retreat, matching my pace exactly. When I started jogging, it accelerated. When I stopped, it stopped. I returned to my cruiser and grabbed the dashcam footage. At least I'd have proof now. But when I reviewed the video on my laptop inside the house, my blood ran cold. The footage showed my entire drive home, captured my voice narrating the pursuit, documented every turn and lane change I'd made. But there was no sedan in the footage. Just empty road behind me. I watched it 3 times to be sure. Nothing. I looked out my living room window. The sedan still idled at the end of my street, headlights like patient eyes in the darkness. It was there, but invisible to cameras. I started to question my own perception. Was I having some sort of breakdown? But this felt too real, too consistent. I needed sleep. Clarity would come with rest. I double-checked all my locks, closed all the blinds, and finally fell into an exhausted slumber around 3 a.m. The ringing phone jolted me awake at 6:17. "Sheriff?" Betty's voice was tight with tension. "There's been an incident at the Parkside Diner. Multiple witnesses. You need to come right away." I dressed quickly. As I stepped outside, I saw that the sedan was gone from its watching post. Somehow, that worried me more than seeing it there. The Parkside Diner was cordoned off with Deputy Collins' cruiser and an ambulance parked near the entrance. A small crowd had gathered behind the yellow tape. "What happened?" I asked Collins. "Custormer went crazy. Attacked Louise behind the counter, then fled. She's pretty shaken up but not seriously hurt." I found Louise sitting in the back of the ambulance. She had a small cut above her right eye but seemed more frightened than injured. "Louise, can you tell me what happened?" Her hands trembled. "He came in right at opening, 6 a.m. Ordered coffee, black. Sat at the counter. Didn't say much until I asked if he wanted anything else." She swallowed hard. "That's when he started talking crazy." "What did he say?" He said he was watching the watcher. That you needed to stop looking for him or everyone would see what you did." Her eyes found mine, confused and afraid. "He said, tell Sheriff Mercer the accident wasn't an accident." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. "What accident?" "I don't know. But then he grabbed my wrist and whispered something else. She lowered her voice. He said, "Ask him about November 16th. Ask him about the black car in Miller's Creek." November 16th. 3 years ago. The night everything changed. "What did this man look like?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "Average height. Wearing a dark jacket. But his face." She shuddered. "It was wrong somehow. Like it wasn't quite finished." "I know that sounds crazy." "Security cameras," I said to Collins. "I want all footage from the diner, traffic cams, everything." But I already knew what we'd find. Nothing. Just like my dash cam. Back in my cruiser, I sat with the engine off, trying to make sense of it all. November 16th. The night I'd swerved to avoid a deer on Miller's Creek Road, lost control of my personal vehicle, a black Dodge Charger, and hit a tree. I'd walked away with minor injuries. The accident report was filed, insurance claim processed. Except for one detail only I knew, there had been no deer. I'd been drinking that night. I'd lied on the report, staged the scene during the crucial minutes before another car stopped to help. A momentary lapse in judgment that could have cost me my career. No one else knew the truth. No one could know. Unless... My radio crackled. "Sheriff?" Betty's voice. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "He won't give his name. Just says he drives a black sedan and you've been looking for him." My heart nearly stopped. "I'll be right there." The station was quiet when I arrived. No sign of any visitor. "Where is he?" I asked Betty. She looked confused. "Who, Sheriff?" "The man you just radioed me about." "Black sedan?" Betty shook her head slowly. "I haven't radioed you all morning. You told us to maintain radio silence while you interviewed the victim." "I never said that." I went to my office, closed the door, and sank into my chair. The world felt unstable, reality bending around me. I pulled out my personal phone, scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months. "Karen? It's me. Do you remember my accident 3 years ago? The one on Miller's Creek Road?" "Of course," she said. "That was the night before I asked you for the divorce. What do you remember about it?" She sighed. "You were drinking at Sullivan's bar. You called me to pick you up, but by the time I got there, you'd already left. 2 hours later, the hospital called. You'd wrapped your car around a tree." Her voice hardened. "You claimed you swerved to avoid a deer, but I saw the empty whiskey bottle in your gym bag when I brought you clothes the next morning. That was the last straw for me. I didn't remember any of this. Not calling her. Not the hospital. My memory was of walking away from the crash, calling in the accident myself, waiting for the responding officer, Jenkins from the county sheriff's department, and filing the report. After hanging up, I pulled the accident report from county records. The responding officer was listed as Deputy Jenkins, as I remembered. But the signature on the report wasn't his. It was mine. Sheriff David Mercer, signing off on my own accident. Jenkins had retired 2 years ago. I called him anyway. "Sheriff Mercer. How the hell are you?" His voice was warm with sunshine and retirement. "Good, Jenkins. Quick question. Do you remember responding to my accident on Miller's Creek Road? November 16th, 3 years back? Your accident?" Confusion colored his voice. "No, I never responded to any accident involving you." I would have remembered that. Cold dread settled in my stomach. I hung up and stared at the accident report, my signature stark against the white page. A signature I didn't remember making on a report I didn't remember filing about a version of events that didn't match my memory or anyone else's. A knock at my office door made me jump. Deputy Collins stood in the doorway. "Security footage from the diner is ready," he said. "But there's something weird." The monitor showed the diner's interior from 4 different camera angles. 6 a.m., Louise unlocking the door, turning on lights. 6:05, Louise behind the counter, preparing coffee. No customer entered. At 6:17, Louise suddenly jerked as if someone had grabbed her hand going to her face where the cut would appear. She struggled against an invisible assailant, mouth moving in response to words we couldn't hear because there was no one there to speak them. "What the hell?" Collins whispered. I fast-forwarded through footage from the past week. The same pattern repeated in different locations. People reacting to someone who wasn't visible on camera. Car doors opening and closing by themselves. Items moving as if picked up by invisible hands. And in the background of 3 separate clips, my cruiser was visible, patrolling. Following nothing. Stopping to observe nothing. My face captured clearly as I stared intently at empty space. "Sheriff?" Collins was looking at me strangely. "What's going on?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm going to find out." That night, I waited in my darkened living room, watching through the blinds. Right on schedule, the black sedan appeared at the end of my street. This time, I didn't approach it. I simply watched, as it had watched me. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. November 16th. Miller's Creek. Black car. Driver, David Mercer. Passenger, Jacob Turner. Jacob Turner. The name hit me like a physical blow. My mind struggled against a flood of returning memories. A late-night drive, an argument, a struggle over the wheel, the horrifying impact. Not with the tree, but with the guardrail over Miller's Creek. The car plunging into the frigid water below. Swimming to shore alone. Walking home in wet clothes. Reporting my car stolen the next day. Jacob Turner. My best friend since high school. Reported missing 3 years ago. Never found. The sedan's headlights flashed once, twice, 3 times. Another text. The truth surfaces eventually, Sheriff. Like bodies in Miller's Creek. I thought of the gaps in the camera footage, the missing memories, the contradictory accounts. I thought of a faceless driver who could apparently manipulate technology, implant false memories, appear to some people but not to others. I thought of Jacob, who had threatened to reveal my drinking problem to the department if I didn't get help. Jacob, who had gotten into my car that night to drive me home. Jacob, whose body I'd left in the sunken vehicle while I saved myself. A final text appeared on my phone. "I'm coming inside now, David. Time we talked face to face." I heard my front door unlock, footsteps in the hallway. I turned, service weapon drawn, to face the intruder. But there was no one there. Just empty space where a person should be. Yet the floorboards creaked under invisible weight. The chair across from me depressed as if someone had sat down. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room. My own voice answered from the void. "I think you already know. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.